When the first tailored collar of his Eton blazer was handed over at dawn in the quiet nursery, Catherine felt the air thicken around her heart as though the walls of Kensington had tightened their grasp. Prince George, 12 years old today, stood framed in the doorway like a boy stepping into a legend he never chose, a lineage scripted in stone and ceremony that demands he follow in his father's footsteps through halls built for heirs. She had imagined this moment countless times, examining crests, smoothing lapels, testing buttons, but never truly believed the reality could feel so vast, so quiet and empty, as it would when he walked away. Every Sunday morning, she had poured his cereal with a soft hum, guided his hand on his toothbrush, helped him knot his tie while whispering stories to calm his nerves. Now, each of those small rituals was penned in a private ledger of memory she pressed to her chest, as if to hold him close against the tide of tradition pulling him toward Eton's ancient gates next September. The choice, carved from centuries of royal script, belonged to William, who had once sat in the same classrooms and worn the same robes, believing the boarding house corridors would prepare him for the crown as surely as any coronation. But Catherine carried the scars of her own battle, months of solitude battling illness, the echo of empty wards, the realization that every advantage came tethered to sacrifice. Her body, still regaining strength, whispered warnings that emotion could be danger, that sorrow might be measured in heartbeat irregularities and sleepless nights. In candlelit hours after the household slept, she wrote letters she would never send, confessions in fountain pen of bones that ached to bend so her son might huddle beside her once more, pleas scribbled yet never posted begging the firm to conceive of a different path, part-time boarding, a stretch of home-taught weeks, a gap year before the full plunge. Palace advisors, speaking in clipped tones beneath vaulted ceilings, reminded her of security protocols, of the digital age's voracious appetite for royal children's images, of the logistics that turned private visits into state-level operations. They weighed the risks of early disclosure against the benefits of managing public narrative. Yet no spreadsheet could capture the weight of a mother's longing, the pressure that threaded through Catherine's chest each time she imagined George navigating a new dormitory lineup of unfamiliar faces and outdated uniforms. On bright autumn mornings, they walked together in the gardens of Kensington, the leaves crackling beneath their feet as George chattered about tutor interviews and cricket trials. William listened with fatherly pride, his jaw set in quiet resolve. Catherine nodded, tucking a lock of hair behind her ear, every step a question. Could she let him go? At home, she pored over prospectuses and maps, plotting the route from Windsor to Eton via private carriage, a short-lived illusion of proximity that would cost a small fortune but promise slices of the childhood she feared losing. In her mind's eye she saw the steam of the locomotive curling into dawn, a silhouette of her son on the platform, his wave more triumphant than sad, but she knew her own smile would be brittle, her wave forced. She conjured letters sealed with wax, long missives of encouragement and reassurance, but worried those words would be measured out of context, turned into headlines about royal fears rather than parental love. Friends close to her whispered that Catherine had recovered her public voice with aplomb, mastering engagements and speeches with the poise of a queen-in-waiting, but in private she confessed to catching herself trembling at the thought of empty chairs at cake-decorating dates and bedtime stories left untold. She recalled her own mother's lullabies, the warmth of family breakfasts, the security of routine, privileges so ordinary they seemed miraculous now. William, sensing her distress, offered steady strength. He reminded her that tradition had guided their forebears through centuries, that the corridors of Eton had produced scholars, leaders, and even monarchs who could withstand every storm. He recounted his own days at the school, the pranks and the prayers, the camaraderie that formed the bonds of friendship stronger than any title. He spoke of duty, of preparing for a life in service, and Catherine felt his conviction clash with the aching truth of her sorrow. One evening, they retired to the library with volumes of royal memoirs, pages yellowed with age, entries about Queen Victoria's own sorrow at sending Arthur to boarding school, notes on Elizabeth II's own heartache as Philip left for naval training, and Catherine found comfort in their shared humanity. If queens before her had walked this path, she could too. Yet the ache remained, a dull drumbeat urging her to rethink, to delay, to redefine what tradition could be for a modern mother and her son. In the nursery, she began a new habit, collecting objects to send with George, his favorite sketchbook, a knitted scarf she'd made in secret therapy sessions, a pressed flower from their first spring outing. Each item was wrapped in tissue and sealed with a kiss, a talisman against loneliness, a mother's vow woven into cloth and paper. When George finally donned his blazer in that same nursery, Catherine stood behind him, adjusting his cuffs and straightening his collar as she had countless times before, only now her fingers lingered on the crisp wool, memorizing the shape of his shoulders, the curve of his neck. She offered him a final salute, a nod and a smile that trembled but did not break, before William reached out to take his other hand, forming a tableau of lineage and love that would be captured by palace photographers and disseminated worldwide. Yet, even as the flashbulbs flashed, Catherine felt a hollow ache as her boy stepped forward into a future shaped by rights as old as the monarchy itself. In the carriage home, she leaned her head against William's shoulder, absorbing his warmth, drawing strength from his steady pulse. They spoke not of regrets but of hope, of letters returned in crayon scrawl, of weekend visits by discreet motorcade, of George's eventual return to graduated independence, of the day he would stand beside them at public engagements no longer as a child but as the symbol of continuity. And as the gates of Kensington closed behind them, Catherine allowed herself one silent prayer, that her son, carrying his mother's love and his father's legacy, would find in the hallowed halls of Eton not only the rigors of education but the gentle reminder that home waits in a mother's heart, no matter how far his footsteps roam. Yet even as George settles into the rhythms of his new life, early mornings in dormitories, lunch queues beneath Gothic arches, and evening prep by flickering lantern light, Catherine's thoughts wander back to the small joys they once shared. She imagines his first study group under the towering elms, the echo of youthful laughter where once only solemn footsteps sounded. She pictures him discovering books and friendships, his world widening even as her own contracts in his absence. In those moments, she resolves to transform her longing into purpose. She expands her patronages to include the boarding school charities she once only glimpsed from a distance, commissioning bespoke mental health programs that mirror the support she provided during her own convalescence. By forging partnerships with Eton's counseling services, she ensures George and his classmates have safe harbors of their own, a mother's embrace extended into every counseling suite. On weekends, William and Catherine negotiate brief interludes of presence, arranging for discreet joint visits when state business allows, transforming melancholy into opportunities for reunion. Tea and cake in the walled garden, impromptu cricket matches at sunset, quiet reading sessions beneath a sky streaked with the rosy hues of dusk. Each visit becomes a ritual of reassurance, a testament that royalty need not be synonymous with distance. Meanwhile, at home, Charlotte and Louis thrive, eager to fill the spaces left by their brother's departure with art projects and backyard adventures, colorful canvases littering the grass, little uniforms hanging from a washing line that now bears 2 empty hooks. Watching their laughter, Catherine summons courage, knowing that sending George away teaches resilience to each of her children, forging character within the crucible of change. In private meetings with education advisors, she champions blended learning initiatives, advocating for digital classrooms that link Windsor's drawing rooms with Eton's lecture halls, so that her children might share lessons across royal residences. She speaks passionately about modernizing tradition, preserving the essence of boarding education while softening its edges to allow familial bonds to remain strong. As the weeks pass toward the autumn term, Catherine's heart still tightens at every echo of footsteps beyond the nursery door. Yet she carries in her breast a quiet confidence born of love channeled into action, programs launched, partnerships formed, a mother's ingenuity turning absence into outreach. For though George's footsteps may lead him away, they leave behind a trail of innovation, compassion, and connection that Catherine has woven into the very fabric of the royal institutions she holds dear. And in that weaving, she ensures that wherever George goes, he carries not only the weight of heritage but also the warmth of a mother's unbreakable devotion.